Through this scientific inquiry, we are going to be answering the question, why does the Dubious Dtella gecko lose its tail? This links to the biological sciences strand in the Australian curriculum and is aimed for students in Year 5. The specific content descriptor chosen focuses on adaptations and how that helps living things to survive in their environments. In this video, we will be discussing the current dominant scientific understanding, or as we refer to it, the CDSU, the risk assessment for the learning experience, an explanation of the 3 lessons for the engage, explore and explain phases, and adjustments to learning diversity in the classroom. A formative assessment piece will then be explained that follows on from the learning experience. All living things in our world have basic needs that need to be met in order to survive. These things include water, energy, and living space. Humans, such as you and me, usually live in some sort of house that provides access to water, food, and an area to live in. This is exactly the same for every species of non-human animals as well. They have all found a space to live in somewhere in the world that suits their needs to help them to survive. Most of you might be familiar with some cats and dogs' homes, as they live inside and outside of our houses. We usually refer to these homes as habitats, where the non-human animal selects a safe place to live in that has access to supplies such as food and water. Throughout this scientific story, we will discuss the Dubious Dtella gecko's way of living to eventually understand why they lose their tail. So listen carefully as we talk about this fascinating non-human animal. The Dubious Dtella species of gecko is native to Australia, and its way of living is extremely clever. This type of gecko has selected its home to be inside and around humans' houses. You might have seen them for yourself scampering around the walls inside of your bedrooms, kitchens, or bathrooms. Why do you think that they chose to live with us? Do our homes provide them with water, food, and a living space? Well, in fact, the answer is yes. The main thing that drives the geckos to our homes is the easy access to their favourite food, insects and spiders. Here, we can now prove just how smart this gecko species is, as they mostly prowl at night for their food supply. If you look closely at night time, when humans generally switch the lights on, we see swarms of insects flying around these lights. What better way for a gecko to capture its meal than waiting for them to come inside of their own living space? Because the Dubious Dtella geckos have made our homes their habitats to survive in, we informally refer to them as house geckos. So, now that we know that these house geckos have all of its needs met for survival, we can now dig deeper into understanding how they move around to keep themselves safe. Like every food chain, there is always predators. These are wild non-human animals that need to eat the flesh of another non-human animal for their survival. Just like the geckos prey on insects, the geckos have their very own predators that they need to stay clear of in order to stay alive. Can you think of any predators that might live in your house? Actually, the gecko has quite a number of predators due to their small size. Some of these also include snakes, birds, large spiders, and some mammal species. Though this may be the case, one of the reasons that this type of gecko has chosen to live in our houses is because it provides a shelter from lots of these non-human animals that humans would not usually allow into their homes. The house geckos love their food so much that they often fight for a spot in the house that gives them access to a tasty meal, like humans competing for a booking at a popular restaurant. Though their way of fighting is truly unique, as they need to try their best to keeping themselves alive. But how do they do this? Well, due to the danger risks linked with predators, non-human animals need to employ a range of strategies to guard themselves against predation, such as our household pets or even fighting with their very own species to get food. This is where we now see the house geckos as an amazing species, as they show a very rare survival instinct. Through many observations by scientists, and even people like you and I, it has become a known fact that when the Dubious Dtella gecko comes in direct contact with a predator, such as a cat, it will drop its tail from its body when it's grabbed and run away. Their small size and special toe pads help them to scurry away quickly to find a safe hiding space, as they have the ability to grip onto any surface. Crazy, right? But it doesn't end there. While the gecko is running away as fast as it can, the tail continues to wriggle and jump for about 30 more minutes. This confusion tricks the animals into thinking that they've captured them. We can think of this process very much like a Monopoly game, with their tails being a get-out-of-jail-free card to save their own life. In scientific terms, we call this a structural adaptation. But what stops the predator from grabbing their heads as opposed to their tails? Over time, the Dubious Dtella gecko has learned that moving their bodies to expose their tails to the animal gives them a greater chance to escape, due to their structural tail-removing trait. As you can imagine for yourselves, this is such an incredible way of living that scientists have given it a special name, a behavioural adaptation. We define this as a certain change that living things go through over time to help its species survive. In this case, the gecko has adapted to its environment by rotating their bodies to reveal their tails to their predator, and then detaching it from its body as a way to protect itself from being injured or eaten. By now, you might be thinking that their tails mustn't be that important if the gecko can just detach it from its body so easily. However, this is not the case. Without the tail to distract predators, geckos become extremely vulnerable in their environment. To explain this further, the gecko has already used its get out of jail free card, meaning that if it were to be threatened by another predator, it would have a very small chance of surviving. Luckily enough, these geckos are able to grow their tails back in about a month. Once it has regrown, they can continue this process to keep their species alive. Therefore, according to the CDSU, all of the features that connect to the Dubious Dtella geckos, such as their habitats, what they eat, and their predators, have a very large influence on why the gecko loses its tail. By changing their features over time through structural and behavioural adaptations, supports the gecko to continue living, ultimately benefiting future generations of geckos as they too will have a greater chance of surviving in their chosen environment. So, next time you see a gecko in your house, watch closely as it moves, talks, or even hides, and see if you can identify any more interesting facts that might help them to survive. To ensure that all the health and safety precautions are identified throughout this scientific inquiry, we have compiled a list of important hazards or potential risks that students need to follow throughout the 3 lessons. Students must be reminded to follow the classroom's behaviour expectations and safety procedures, moving around the classroom safely, as well as being aware of their surroundings. As this is a science unit, students must be careful when handling all materials and not to eat, drink, or use any materials as weapons.
Please pause the video to read the following learning objectives that will be explored throughout the Engage, Explore and Explain phase of this 3-lesson science inquiry unit. In the Engage phase, students will begin the lesson seated at their desks facing the interactive smartboard. The teacher places an image of a Dubious Dtella gecko on the board. The teacher activates a class brainstorm to find out everything students know about geckos by asking the question, "What do you know about geckos?" Students are grouped into their tables and given a whiteboard marker to share. They are asked to write one thing that they know about a gecko on the class whiteboard. Students then rotate the marker throughout their table group, activating prior knowledge. The teacher then acknowledges similar ideas written on the board by circling common answers so they can investigate further. Have students listen to the following short story. Students will then write a response to what they think the gecko should do in the form of a diagram, dot points, or a small paragraph in their interactive science notebooks.
As a teacher, we must understand that each and every student has his or her own individual learning requirements. Therefore, it is necessary to implement differentiated and inclusive strategies to adjust and cater learning for the needs of all students. According to the Australian curriculum, schools and teachers are obligated under the standards to consider reasonable adjustments to provide diverse students, in this case, students with disability, with opportunities to participate in education and training on the same basis as students without disability. These adjustments have been considered during each phase of the learning experience, where activities have been modified in relation to their content, process, product, and learning environment to cater for the needs of all students.
As shown on the current slide, we have outlined examples of 4 different impairments that are most frequently seen in the classroom. These include hearing, visual, physical, and intellectual impairments. For each phase of the learning experiences, appropriate adjustments have been provided for students who may be diagnosed with these impairments. These adjustments are suitable for the Engage phase. Please pause the video to review the slide and gain understanding.
In the Explore phase, the teacher leads a physical activity called Tail Swat. To introduce the concept of the game, the teacher leads a discussion and recalls students' previous lesson's mind map activity. To begin the game, students are divided into 4 groups of geckos and assigned a safe zone in the marked area. 2 students are assigned the role of a cat and will explore the game as a predator with an easily distinguishable coloured vest. The aim of the game is for the geckos to retrieve as many insects or food from the middle hula hoop to take back to their safe zone without getting caught by a cat and getting their tail captured. If a gecko gets their tail taken off them by a cat, the gecko returns to their safe zone before they can try again. However, if you get tagged a second time by a cat without your tail, you become become a defender of your safe zone. If all the insects are taken from the hula hoop, your team can start to collect food from the other team's safe zones. The game is timed for 1 to 2 minutes to see how much food the groups of geckos can retrieve. At the end of each 1 to 2 minute round, tally the number of geckos with and without a tail attached. Alter the game slightly by adding more cats and then tally the results of each game. Teacher and students return to the classroom to reflect on the game, where the teacher leads a collaborative jigsaw activity, providing each student with a number from 1 to 5. Students then form groups based on their allocated number. Each group is given one of the following questions. Once groups have answered their question, they then step into the role of experts. When they return to their original tables with a student from 1 to 5 in each group, students discuss their answers to each question with the members in their group. They then document their understandings into their interactive science notebooks.
Throughout the explore phase, as students are completing the activities, appropriate adjustments can be made for students with these specific impairments. Again, please pause the video to review the slide and gain understanding.
In the explain phase, teacher asks students to open their interactive science notebooks and discuss as a whole class their understandings from the previous lesson. The teacher writes these answers on the whiteboard and encourages students to make links. Teacher identifies the links established by the students from their discussion. After this, the teacher explains that geckos have the ability to drop its tail from its body to distract any non-human animal, helping the gecko to make a quick getaway to save its life. The teacher asks students, what do you think will happen to geckos in the future that can't drop their tails to escape a non-human animal? Students then write their answers into their interactive science notebook. Teacher rereads the story that was read in the first lesson, so students are able to write a second response in their interactive science notebooks. For this response, they are required to draw a scenario of a gecko and a non-human animal of choice. Students need to demonstrate how a gecko defends themselves in order to stay alive in their environment. The students then explain their illustrations with a short paragraph and present it to the class. To end the learning sequence, the teacher reads the current dominant scientific understanding to fill in any gaps.
Throughout the explain phase, there are multiple adjustments that can be applied for students with multiple impairments. Please pause the video to review the slide and gain understanding.
These students would hopefully be able to answer the question as to why does the Dubious Dtella gecko lose its tail and satisfy the following learning objectives. This assessment uses the basic principles of science inquiry, where students are able to observe, experience and explore questions and then link them to their prior knowledge, which cultivates a deep scientific understanding. This assessment worksheet was created and designed to allow students to reflect on their knowledge about geckos and adaptations and how it's changed since the beginning of the first lesson. It also allows teachers to assess their students' ability to satisfy the learning objectives and knowledge and understanding of the desired CDSU content, which students will explore through the first 3 phases of the teaching model: engage, explore, and explain. Students will be able to achieve this by combining their observations from the experiences they had during the teacher-guided hands-on games and the scaffolded questions given to them by the teacher and through peer discussion. Students will be read a story as a stimulus during the engage phase. There will be a question about their own current gecko knowledge. This will be revisited during the explain phase as a stimulus for this formative assessment task. They will be guided to physically document their own knowledge through image and notes within their interactive notebooks, which paves the way for reflection during the later stages of assessment. Lesson 2, Explore Phase, incorporates the use of student observation and questioning, but also gives the students the chance to further develop or challenge their current opinions/alternative conceptions through a fun, interactive game. Formative assessment was incorporated here. Students are encouraged to develop their learning without the fear of being graded. Along with teacher-facilitated discussions and the note-taking within their interactive notebooks, during this practical hands-on approach to learning, students will start to formulate connections between the probability of a gecko's survival and its adaptation and ability to lose its tail. The formative assessment worksheet shown here is integrated into the explain phase before the teacher fills in the gaps in the student's knowledge and reveals the CDSU-aligned answers. This assessment allows students to recall their knowledge and explore their understanding around a gecko's environment through recreating a diagram of an event within the stimulus story. Using their notes and diagrams, which they have compiled within their interactive science notebooks, this diagram recreation gives students the opportunity to self-reflect on their own learning since the first lesson. Students will add in details to their scientific diagrams that they deem relevant. The questions provided within the assessment, as well as the class discussions, facilitate students to explore their understanding and assess and analyze their ability to connect their new knowledge about adaptation and geckos. This is achieved as the questions have been scaffolded to allow students to investigate and explain why they think this changed behavior can help a gecko escape from a predator and survive. It also allows them to consider the larger aspects of adaptive features as it explores their understanding that this trait will continue to be passed on to future generations of geckos. This rubric shown is designed in such a way that students are able to mark their own work after the teacher has read the full CDSU to them, providing a great opportunity for self-reflection and feedback. The language used includes an interactive feature such as getting a peer or teacher to look over their work.